You are listening to the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast, where you discover management insights and strategies for a successful dental practice. There are also interviews with key people in the industry who have advice and services to help you and your team achieve great success. Welcome to this episode of the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast, and I can't tell you how excited I am to have this discussion with my guest today. Now, many people out there, if you've read my articles, if you've been a client, if you've read my blogs, you will know the story of Meg. Meg is the poor victim I had when I was a terrible micromanager. And Meg was also the beautiful ray of sunshine that came into my life to help reform me from a micromanager to a much more effective human being when working with other people. And so it gives me great joy to say, welcome, Meg, my victim and the person who enlightened me to a better path. How are you?
I'm really well, Julie. How are you? Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, that is my absolute pleasure. And it's such an important topic. For people who aren't aware of the story, I'll give you a very quick version of it, but then Meg and I are going to go deeper into it and what our own different personal experiences of the situation was. Now, this is a situation where I think it possibly has touched every person out there, whether they're a manager or an employee. So let me set the tone. I was working at a fantastic practice in Victoria, in Melbourne, and I was on reception. Then we got busier. We needed another receptionist. The lovely Meg joined our group, and she just needed training in the software. She knew her stuff beautifully well. She was like me. She had a long history as a dental assistant and patient facilitator, coordinator, and reception as well. So she just needed training in the computer system. However, despite the fact that she trained up very swiftly on the computer system, I decided that it was something that I enjoyed, that space of telling somebody else what to do all the time and modifying the way she did things just to conform to exactly the way I wanted to do it. And so I just continued on. I thought everything was going fine. Meg is a beautiful human being, and she certainly wasn't the type to sit there and say, boy, get out of my ass. And let me do my job. And so I thought everything was going fine. And then I went and worked at a dental supply company, worked for somebody who was completely delightful. However, they were a micromanager on me. I could not make one move without this person coming in and saying, did you do this? Did you do that? What about doing it this way? And within a 6-month period, what I discovered was that my self-confidence took a plummeting drop. My problem-solving skills went out the window, and my short-term memory stopped as well. I couldn't access anything with my short-term memory. I felt quite stupid. And I really did feel like I had been dumbed down. When my old boss, so Meg's still current boss, said, how about coming back? I thought, I'm just going to jump on that and say, actually, you may be joking, but I want to come back. And she said, great. And then she rang me back 5 minutes later and said, we've got a problem. And I said, I think I know what the problem is. Meg doesn't want me back. And she said, that's right. And I thought, oh, my God, I know exactly what's happened. And so I said, if Meg is going to give me the generosity of spirit enough to go out for coffee with me, I'd love to have a chat with her, because I think I've just been through what I put her through. We went out for a coffee. Thank you so much, Meg, for agreeing to do that, because it was a big shift for me. And I told you what I'd been through, and I said, is this what I've done to you for the past couple of years? And you said yes. And then you told me your experience. And then you helped me. We created a plan moving forward of how to get me out of my micromanaging ways. And then beautifully, we continued on working happily for the next few years until your path took you up to Queensland and my path took me on to practice ownership.
Yeah.
So you have played an enormous role in my life, Meg. And I want to tell everybody out there, and we both want to tell everybody out there, how we got to a point where both of our experiences was a path for growth for both of us. Me out of the micromanagement space, but you as well in the space that you took in that situation as well. Okay, so this is going to be a very interesting discussion. As I say, Meg, how many of the people out there do you think have experienced this in dental surgery teams?
Oh, look, I think there would be many people that have experienced it. I actually went back into a practice just to help out, and I've recently experienced it. So I had a new version. It was probably a worse version than I experienced with you, because you and I actually had a friendship, and that's what made it really difficult for me to tell you that I wasn't happy with what you were doing, and because I loved you. And I loved you outside of work enough that I didn't know how to quite manage that. But in this situation, I was able to nip it in the bud pretty swiftly, and I resigned after 3 days and went ahead and told the manager exactly what I thought, that it was a toxic environment, and she tried to wash over it, whitewash it, which was quite sad. But, this is what people do. You either take it on board or you don't. And you and I were able to take on board the lessons from what had happened and what we needed to change to move forward. And that's exactly what we did. And we achieved some amazing things. That practice ran beautifully. So, but it took a lot from both sides.
Yeah,
that's what I felt.
It did. And thank God we did move through that journey together. I'm always going to be regretful for the negative impact that I had on you. But gosh, the growth that I developed from that was resounding. So to further clarify for the audience out there what micromanagement actually looks like, both for I'm going to say the victim of it, because it does end up being a victim. And you saying before that after just 3 days you quit, after seeing the signs of micromanagement. I think that's one of the things that happens. That's one of the lessons we learn if we're a victim of micromanagement. We see those warning signs very early, and we have been through it all before. And so we say, never again, I'm getting out now, because traditionally and routinely, it is a very difficult dynamic to shift, quite often impossible to shift.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I when I spoke to her, I actually said to that manager that I would have to go back 20 years and become the people pleaser that I was at that point. And I wasn't prepared to do that. That it wasn't me who needed to change. It was actually their environment and her management. So, and I felt like I was doing her a service by being kind enough to actually tell her that, because I'm probably going to help a lot of other team members on that team. And she had one of 40. I was just one of 40 people. So it was massive. So hopefully...
That is massive. That is massive. And, you know, the thing that brought me to that headspace of being very open to change and actually just desperately wanting that change within myself, because I just did not... One, I didn't want to have the impact, that negative impact that I'd experienced that previous 6 months. I didn't want to have that on any more people other than you. I didn't want to go on making that mistake over and over again. But also, it is a level of self-awareness too. I didn't have the right to have that impact on anybody else.
No. But we don't see that. And, you know, you were saying before that you were... regretful of the actual experience that I'd had. But I have to say, as terrible as it was to actually go through at that point, it actually forced me to look at who I was, what I needed to change, and how I needed to grow and develop. And that's what I went on to do. And then I was able to coach other people how not to be like that as well. So it's... I mean, I know it's not a nice experience to go through, but it's what you take from the experience that's really important. And it's that you move away from it without feeling bad about yourself and also not feeling bad about the person who did it, because they're unconscious about what they're actually doing. Yeah.
That's absolutely for sure. And that's a beautiful lesson to actually take away from any negative situation that we move through within our dental teams, that how am I going to use this to become a better version of me, or to create a better environment about me and empower others to be able to do the same. That's a beautiful, beautiful lesson. So to go through what actual micromanagement is, let me go through. I'm referring back to an article I wrote for Australasian Dental Practice magazine, because part of what I've taken away from our experience together is talking about this story as often as I can, because it would be a tremendous thing if micromanagement wasn't such a common thing within the dental industry. So I'm going to go through a list of 6 points. So people out there, managers of people out there can actually reflect, am I a micromanager? Well, let's go through these 6 points and see if you actually are. Number one, do you immediately step in as the leader when a new process is needed? And so you're not allowing other people to step forward with their brilliance. It always has to be you. Do you believe that only you know how to manage a task best? Certainly that was that was my headspace when I was managing you badly, Meggie. Do you struggle with delegating tasks? Do you monitor others' performance too closely? I mean, that's micromanagement to a T, isn't it? It's that heavy scrutiny over the movements and actions of another human being. Are some of your directions stating the obvious? That was when I was going through my 6 months of being the victim of a micromanager, like the amount of things that were quite obvious that this person was stating to me, such as I'd address out an envelope and they'd pick up the envelope and they'd say, is this to the right person? I'm like, of course it's bloody to the right person. What are you talking about?
Causes doubt.
Yeah, and it does make you doubt yourself. Go, oh, did I put it to the right person? And as your self-confidence, of course, erodes away, you start questioning everything that you do. Mm-hmm. And the sixth point is, do you disregard the knowledge and experience of others? And I think I've certainly been, I've done that in the past. I've done all of these six. I was micromanager to a T. So I've done all those six things. What do you think about those indicators of micromanagement, Meg?
I think that covers it very, very well. And, you know, one of the experiences that I had in that recent practice was that you had to answer the phone within one ring. And otherwise you would get an SMS that you hadn't answered the phone. And I hadn't received one yet, but I kept being told that by the other team members, and they were reacting out of fear of that manager. And I felt like I was under a lot of pressure. So I would have a client in front of me, and I was taught that client in front of me was the most important person to pick up the phone and put the other person on hold. But I was having to ignore, while I was being trained, the person in front of me and trying to grab for the phone. It was a very, very stressful situation. So it was putting a lot more pressure on me. So I think, you know, most of the things that you've covers it really, really well. But that was one of the highest things that I saw on there, was that it's, you know, jumping on people and thinking that you know best and thinking that you know how they should do their job. One of the things that I'd been taught earlier in dental was you're supposed to answer the telephone within 3 rings. So that's what I had in my head. And I had in my head also that if you answered in 1 ring, it makes you look desperate. And that's through 25 years of training. And then I'm being told 1 ring. And so it was just very contradictory. And there were so many other things. So, yeah, it's interesting what it actually does to you and how it makes you feel and how fearful it actually makes you feel in that position, that you might lose your position because you're not following through on a directive that someone else is giving you. So, yeah, I think
and instead of using your initiative and creativity to move through your day and naturally find the more efficient, more productive ways of doing things, you're constantly managing your day from a space of fear. It's avoidance of scrutiny that you end up managing your day with. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just complete fear. And the other thing that it actually does, it actually creates this thing where you go into a space of not telling the truth and not wanting to be honest. And so if you're asked if you did something, because you know that you're going to end up being fearful, you could lose your job, this could put you in a bad position, you end up altering yourself from the truth, and that's not congruent with you if you're a really honest person. And you don't want to be in that space, but this person's forced you into it, because if you tell them the truth, there's going to be wrath from it. So it's an interesting dynamic to actually be pushed into. So instead of it creating honesty and a trusting environment, it creates competition, lack, fearfulness, dishonesty, people who are out for themselves rather than you know, wanting to put more into a team. You know, like they're so worried and fearful about being in trouble themselves that they will actually put someone else under the bridge rather than themselves to save themselves, which is quite sad. And
I agree wholeheartedly, and I've seen it in dental teams, as you have as well. And I just to update it, people a little bit, to bring them up to speed. Meg, since you have left the dental industry, you've gone back into it just recently, the last just couple of weeks have you gone back into it. But you've been a personal coach for the last number of years, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been a personal coach. So I'm a business, lifestyle, and wellness coach. And I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And so I help people with their self-esteem, their self-worth, their confidence, all of those types of things. And so for me, I could see the red light as soon as I saw it go on. I was like, no, this is not for me. And the only thing that drove me back into going back into a surgery was that COVID's hit and things are a little bit complicated for everyone. And so we have to diversify a little bit. And so I need a little bit of something on the side to keep me going in between clients. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered.
What a lovely entrance back into the dental industry.
It was a swift exit as well.
This episode of this podcast, so... So I think it's such an important topic. And I agree, Meg, I have been witness to dental teams where it does end up being, no, look at her, blame her, look what she's doing wrong, because at least the scrutiny's off me.
Yes.
So it separates your team and fractures a normally happy culture. And the other thing that you said, which really resonated as well, is there's no trust anymore. A micromanager cannot have a trusting relationship with the people she's managing. Would you agree with that statement?
I would absolutely agree, because they can't be honest with her for fear of what she'll say or what she'll do or what they will actually experience as a result. What would be the repercussion of what they actually say to her. When I left this position, I had nothing to lose, so I told her exactly what I thought, but she didn't want to hear it. She wasn't at that point where she was ready to do some self-development on herself. And as a manager, we have to lead through being self-aware. And one of the things that she actually said to me when I asked her, I said, did you hear how you spoke to me? Did you think that was okay? And she said, no, Meg, I didn't hear. And I kind of went, oh. And I said, you didn't hear your own, how you responded to me? And she said, no. And I said, well, that's not having awareness. And you need to be aware as a manager. You need to be aware of how you approach your team and how you interact with them and be respectful. And just because you're the boss, it never means that you should take things to the nth degree, and you can't just respond to people rudely and aggressively and just because you hold that position. So, but she wasn't ready to take that step to understand. So, and that's okay. Everyone's at whatever level of awareness that they're at. But we do have to take things on board when team members actually say things to us. And we need to look at who's the common denominator in this. Is it me, or is it, the person that's complaining? We need to look at all those things.
For sure. And something else that I've noticed too is that you don't actually need to be working one-on-one with people physically in the one room to be a micromanager. Quite often now, because of, there's cameras and the cloud-based dental management systems and all the rest of it, I quite often over my career as a consultant have heard the complaint, she's at home or he's at home, the boss is at home, dialing in, telling me what I'm doing wrong. I've only just made the appointment time and they're already modifying how I've done it. Yes. So it can be remote micromanagement as well.
Well, there was, in this place that I went to, there were cameras everywhere, and someone very politely pointed out to me that my calls had all been recorded. And I was like, wow, okay. And there was no explanation there was no recording for the client who was calling to say that you're going to be monitored for training. And I didn't know. So my privacy was being breached, as was the actual client, and I don't believe that that's the right thing to do. I mean, we need to disclose all that sort of stuff to our team. It puts them under real scrutiny that someone shouldn't be under. And there were cameras everywhere. And I kind of looked at it and went, why? Why do we now have cameras everywhere? You know, in the 90s we didn't. And even in the early 2000s, we didn't either. And suddenly everyone has to be monitored and micromanaged via cameras and recordings. It's crazy. Yeah.
It's all about the intention. What's the agenda behind the camera, behind the recording of the phone calls? If the agenda is to scrutinise your employees, the result is not going to be great. Yes. The impact's not going to be great on your team, and trust will be thrown out the window. However, if those cameras and recordings are only ever used to improve performance as a coaching aid, where there is a real process behind it of team improvement, that's when it can be of benefit to the practice. But we need to be very careful when we implement such things, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's have a look at why you and I so passionately believe, and many people out there so passionately believe, that micromanagement should be turfed out or managed. If you've got a micromanager in your organisation, these are the very compelling reasons why you should be managing it very, very effectively and very, very quickly as well. Number one, there's a high employee turnover. What I've noticed in dental teams is either you have a high turnover, but I've also seen situations where there's a micromanager and there's a couple of team members that just continually hang around, but their self-confidence is so battered down, they don't believe they're going to be competent going for a job anywhere else, and so they feel trapped there, psychologically trapped there. And so one of the results can be that you've got a consistently high turnover of team members as people like you, Meg, leave. They see the warning signs and they're like, I'm out of here. Yeah. And people like me, when I was going through it myself as well, after a 6-month period, you start to recognize the damaging effect on your soul and you go, I'm out of here. So high employee turnover is certainly one of the reasons why you should be managing micromanagement out of your practice. Another one is the demotivated team. So that's the other side of it. You've got the people that do hang around. They're not totally engaged. They're trying to avoid scrutiny. They're not stepping outside and coming up with great, brilliant ideas. They're just doing the norm. They're trying not to be seen, and they are not consistently improving in their performance because it's too dangerous to do so, because in order to improve, we must make mistakes. And with micromanagement, mistakes are not acceptable.
No.
The other one is increased sick days. This is a classic, isn't it? That it takes more enthusiasm, more energy for a scrutinised team member to turn up every day. And they're not going to feel that way every single morning. All it will take is maybe not as much sleep the night before, maybe heavy scrutiny the day before, maybe just feeling slightly under the weather. And so they think, I just can't face that again today. And so I think there's increased sick days. Have you noticed that, Meg, with teams?
Yeah, I've noticed that the mental health days have got bigger for people. It's got worse during COVID as well, but I think anything to do with micromanagement, people are gone. They're out of there and they just don't want to be part of the team for that day. They can't cope. Because it takes a lot of energy to deal with a micromanager. And so if you're feeling a little bit off, you don't want to deal with them. So, yeah, it's totally understandable. Sick days do increase, absolutely.
And another drawback to the micromanagement environment is a drop in production, because it's as simple as you have got a team of members who are not performing at their best.
So they lose their creativity, their innovation, and they lose the ability to come forward with new things. They're too frightened to do that because they might get shot down for it. And they might get ridiculed. So there's no point in actually, sticking your neck out for anyone. And also they get very tired. So they tend to not actually have the ideas that you would have. And if you're busy managing the fear and the stress within your mind, you've got a mindset that's ticking over and over in that fear process, and you can't come out of it with brilliant ideas or even feel like you want to do that. So it's not productive for a team, and you're not going to get your best out of anyone if you're a micromanager. So it's.
I agree. I think that you would be tired because you're spending so much energy checking yourself every minute of every hour of every day. So it would be absolutely exhausting for the team member for sure. And the fifth reason is that there's just slowed progress. And so happy and motivated teams are continually introducing better ways of doing things, better ways of rolling out customer service, better ways and more efficient ways of rolling through all their systems that are the daily operations of the day. But that's all being hampered. And you've mentioned before about self-confidence. The knock to self-confidence is enormously impactful. And if you imagine somebody with extraordinarily low self-confidence, and so they don't have a belief in themselves that they're capable, that they're competent, that they can do anything well, which is exactly what a micromanager is in essence telling somebody. You aren't competent enough. I need to scrutinize your every move and tell you exactly what to do, because that's the only way you become competent, even though it's actually it's making sure the person will never grow. But if you picture somebody yourself with very low self-confidence, it affects the way you tackle every task and the types of tasks that you tackle. You can't foster an environment of growth and development and have micromanagement at the same time. It is impossible because there is not enough self-confidence in the individual to stretch beyond what they're doing right now. Go to the other end of the spectrum, somebody who's got a bound of self-confidence, they take on new and interesting things all the time. They're trying different ways. They're seeing the opportunity in things rather than seeing the reasons why it's going to fail. And that's what you want in your dental team. You want a whole bunch of people that are willing to try something new, raise themselves up to a higher level, stretch outside of their comfort zone to the learning zone. Yeah?
Yeah, because technology is changing, the dental industry is changing, personal development's changing, people's mindsets are changing, and what we have to produce within the surgery is changing as well. So basically, we need to allow people to change and grow. And a micromanager is trying to control everything. They're trying to control it out of fear. And so when they're trying to control that much, people are too frightened to actually step outside of that, and you won't get your best out of that. Anyone in that team, you'll just end up with the same, which will mean that your actual practice won't innovate in the industry, and it probably won't grow as well. So there'll be new things that you won't be able to bring into that surgery because people will be too frightened of making mistakes. And you may not even, they might have information about those new things and you might not ever find out about them because they're too frightened to put their hand up to say, what about this? So it's important to allow your team to expand, invest in some development for them, some education, reward them with some personal development. That would be amazing, if we did that. Buy them a personal development book. These things would be amazing. People don't need rewards of money. Those sorts of gifts would be amazing on the side. Send them to a retreat somewhere so that they get some personal development of some sort. Allow your team to grow and expand. Don't keep them at one level.
I completely agree with you, Meg. And, we as dental teams, we tend to latch on to customer service, telephone skills, patient coordination courses to send dental team members off to improve performance. But gosh, can you imagine if you had a section of your courses and further education that you supplied to your dental team, self-development, self-awareness, so they became better human beings, getting along with each other better, getting the best out of each other consistently. That's impactful, isn't it?
It's really impactful. One of the things that I've learned through all the experience, so I've studied yoga, I've studied a number of different personal development levels, including life coaching, and you need to go through a great deal. I've also studied kinesiology. And with those things, you're developing, and I've been developing over such a long period of time. I'm not the same person as I was when I was in the dental industry. And I think now what I could give to a dental practice would be mind-blowing, maybe a little bit too mind-blowing sometimes, but anyways. And, you know, the personal development part of it, it means that I'm a much more compassionate, kind, aware human being, not only for clients, but for other staff members, for other people in my life. And that's, you know, if we act from kindness and compassion, that's the most important thing that we can do in this life, to, you know, have empathy as well, to feel into how other people are feeling rather than making decisions that are cold and calculating, and not, you know, having a thought for how we impact someone else. And self-development provides us with all of that. So I think that's what's really important. You can give someone all the skills to learn how to answer a telephone or how to be a front desk superstar, but if they're not self-aware and they don't have that kindness and compassion, they're not going to give the best customer service that they could do. So it would be a great idea to invest in that sort of thing, I think, rather than just hard skills. You need to give people some soft skills as well.
For sure. And that self-awareness journey is the path to getting the best out of yourself personally and to get the best out of the people around you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So why do micromanagers micromanage? This is a key question. And when I did some research around this, because I really wanted to get it out of my system, it all comes back down to fear, like many things. Fear of loss of control, fear that if somebody else does things well, it means I'll be looked at as not being as competent, not as important or vital to the organisation. And the fear that we will become redundant in our position. Does that resonate with you as well, Meg, that could be a reason behind people?
Yeah, why they do? Absolutely. So that was the thing that I noticed the most, is that person is just trying to control the whole situation. And it might be that they don't have control in another area of their life, and they feel that the only thing that they can control is their work environment. And so they put all of their eggs into that basket. But they are working on fear. So it could be fear of losing their own position, fear of not being paid the higher wage that they are, fear that someone's going to come up. There's a lot of manoeuvring within dental practices of people wanting to take other people's jobs for the actual money, and thinking that they can do the job themselves better. And so there's always a fear in the back of the micromanager's mind that they're going to lose their job, they're going to lose their money, they're going to lose their actual title and position. And so that kind of forces them into the part where they start trying to control the whole environment. So, yeah, that's kind of the psychology behind it that I can see.
Yeah, yeah. So recognising how, if you're a micromanager out there and you think, gosh, when you went through those 6 things that indicate a micromanager, do you immediately step in as the leader when a new process is needed? Do you believe that only you know how to manage a task? Do you believe with delegating? Do you struggle, with delegating tasks? Do you monitor others' performances too closely? Are some of your directions stating the obvious? And do you disregard the knowledge and experience of others? Recognise the destructive impact this has on your team, and to build up in your brain your negative impact is also a reflection on your management capabilities. And if these negative impacts that we've gone through as well during this session, if you are generating those results, that is a negative reflection upon your management style. So step out of it and let's start talking about how we're going to have a positive impact and a positive influence over the team members that we're working with. Now, when Meg and I sat there and had coffee together, I said to her that I truly wanted to shift out of that micromanagement space. But as you also indicated, Meg, as well, sometimes the micromanager doesn't see what they're doing. And so it required you to help me and really put yourself on the line emotionally as well. Because I said to you, will you call me out when I'm doing it? And you're like, oh, well, you've given me every bit of evidence in the past that wouldn't be a safe thing for me to do. And true. One of the things I did when I was micromanaging, Meg, was You know how when you're in the dental software, you've made an appointment time for a recall, so you put like RC as an abbreviation to indicate what that appointment time is for. I always did a capital R and capital C, and Meg sometimes did capitals, sometimes did lowercase. And so one of the terrible things I did was say, Meg, you know how I put a capital RC and you put lowercase? I think we've got to give a consistent message out there to the team. Why don't you do capitals as well? And so it was a ridiculous little tiny thing that made zero impact on, just only ever had a negative impact on Meg. And that became our little calling card, isn't it? Because I think if you are a micromanager and you're wanting to shift out of that behavior, you do need to have like a fun little thing that your team members can do that makes it safe for them to call you out on it. And so what we decided, Meg, was that when I was micromanaging you, you would say to me, do you want that in caps? And I gave you the assurance that whenever you said that, I would stop talking, smile at you, look you in the eye and say, thank you. And then I would stop that level of communication going on. Is that your memory of the situation too? Because this all happened like 20 years ago, Meg. Can you imagine so much time?
It was such a long time ago. And you know what? I hadn't remembered the caps thing. I remembered that we had a little thing that we actually did that, would trigger you to understand that you were micromanaging, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was. So that's quite funny, really, when you think about it. It really is. I think the thing is that, when we're micromanaging, we don't realise the impact that we're having on the other person. And the one thing that I wanted to say was that the only type of people that a micromanager holds on to are people pleasers. And they're yes people, and they will do whatever you want, but they will not give you anything differently. So you need to really have a team that's full of innovation. And, when you were talking about I would do a large C and a small c, that's because I'm this really creative and innovative person, and I don't see the value in doing one way of doing things. I'll do many different things because I'm thinking about so many different things all at the one time. So I think we need to realise that a team is made up of all types of different personalities, people with different skills, and accept all of that on all different levels and realise that they're not going to put in capitals the whole way through, that some people are going to do it one way or another way, but so long as we get to the end at the right way, and so long as we're not hurting anyone, like if you were doing it in the sterilisation or something like that, you couldn't actually do that. You'd have to follow it by the T. But if it's something where it's just a written thing, not everyone has to do it exactly the same. It can be done at a variation, so long as you get the same end product. That's the most important thing.
And I think that's the key for micromanagers to say to themselves, it's not the path I would take to get to that end point, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong path. And there's every chance that my path is the least efficient, least productive way of getting there as well. So for a micromanager to, first of all, if you've decided that you are micromanaging, let me tell you, one of the most profound things you can do for your personal growth is to front up to your team members and say, I am worried that I've developed my management style to be a micromanager. I don't want to have that. Will you all help me get over that? I will make sure that I will do whatever I can to make it psychologically safe for you to be able to call me out on it. I'm not going to make you pay. I'm not going to freeze you out. I'm not going to give you the silent treatment. I'm not going to look at you sideways. And it takes a big effort from that micromanager, because if you say to your whole team or to one particular team member, I want to shift and change, will you help me? But then you make them pay for it in any way, that trust is blown out of the water for good. So you really need to come up and go, bad luck me. I just have to suck up being told and modified of what I do, because I see it as so important to get over this hurdle, because it is affecting the team way too much, and I don't have the right to have that negative impact on them.
Julie, I also think that as the person who's micromanaged, you need to find a way to help yourself. So that's finding your voice, having a look at why you're a people pleaser, why have you allowed this situation to continue. Have a look at your self-worth and your self-esteem. Have a look at your own self-respect as well. You know, why have you allowed this to happen? Everything that happens outside of us is a reflection of what we have going on inside of us. And so the first place to look is not to point the finger at the micromanager. It's to look at, well, how did I contribute to this situation, and how can I fix myself so that I don't continue to have this situation. So I think there's twofold. I think both people need to do a little bit of repair, and then to sit down and talk to each other like we did. Unfortunately, it took me a lot longer than 20 years to get over that whole situation, not with you, but my own personal growth through it. I grew, but I also needed to do quite a few other things to overcome all of that. So it is a big process, but it's putting your hand up and saying, I need help with this to get through it, and what am I contributing to this situation? And then you can move forward. But we did a great job. I think we managed to work our way through it and go on and run an amazing practice. So we were very, very lucky and fortunate that it was each other rather than other people, because it may not have worked out the same way.
I agree with you. And, you know, what you said at the start too, we had, a loving friendship, which we had something to lose if we didn't move, if you didn't help me over it. We had something to lose. So I'm so grateful. But what happens if there's not that loving relationship? But quite often there won't be between a couple of team members. And it's calling to my mind something that I saw in a communications video a few years ago, and it's really stuck with me because I think it's true. When you've got two team members that are against each other, all it takes is for one of those team members to come to the table with vulnerability. This is how it's making me feel. This is how I feel in my raw space. These are, a friend of mine calls them the hurdy bits. This is how you poke in my hurdy bits. And our natural, like psychopaths to the side, our natural response if someone comes to us vulnerable is to be empathetic. And so it all comes down to what can you do in that initial communication as both the victim and as the micromanager to actually get on that same page, to actually have the same goal. Our goal is to work happily long into the future together and really care for each other. And I think that's one element of it. Just recognize, come in vulnerable. You'll then develop an empathy for each other and be able to move forward from a space of caring. And the way you do that is a lovely term that a psychotherapist from Hungary, Dr. Gabor Mate, he has this lovely phrase. He practices with people who are quite highly traumatized from childhood things. But I love this term, compassionate inquiry. Compassionate inquiry. It's lovely, isn't it? It really indicates the space to hold when you come into this communication. And you just have lovely, frank, caring communication. From that, then, you can identify where we want to end up and what role each one of us need to play in getting there, and develop agreements. You know, how am I going to call you out where it's going to be safe for me to do so, and that it's not going to, poke your hurdy bit as a micromanager and all of a sudden we're at war again. And develop agreements of how you're going to move forward together. And I think one of the crucial things that every team can do is, and every manager, every boss out there can do, is when you do have those conversations around team performance, maybe they're a performance review, maybe they're just a general chat, how's everything going for you? Always ask the question, how could I create a better environment for you to perform in? And that's where possibly you're providing that opportunity for your team members to say, you could actually hold back on the scrutiny a little bit because I'm finding myself not performing to my best.
I think that sounds like a great idea. I think that would be really helpful. I like the term of the vulnerability and what did you call it? It was compassionate inquiry. Compassionate inquiry. Beautiful. Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think that would be very helpful for us all to approach situations like that, definitely.
And certainly it makes us better human beings. We want to be better. I often say, because, one of my values that I move through life with is, can I? Tony Robbins, constant and never ending improvement. I look at myself today and then I reflect back to the way I was 10 years ago, and I hope to God I have improved. I hope I'm a better manager, a better coach, a better consultant, a better wife, a better daughter, a better sister, a better friend, a better everything. I want to just keep getting better and better. And when you have that as one of your driving forces every day when you get up, that's what makes it worthwhile being vulnerable and saying, hey, everybody, how can I improve? I admit I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. We were never meant to be perfect. I will die imperfect no matter how much growth I go through. But what I want, what I desire so greatly is just to practice consistent improvement in my life. Therefore, I'm willing to go through the pain and discomfort of identifying the areas that I can improve in.
I think that's really important. And I think that's what most people are afraid of, actually facing all of that. And I think if we start looking at that and start growing and developing through our experiences, and give yourself the time and the space to actually do that, and not be frightened of making a mistake or taking a risk. These things are really, really important. But to allow yourself to grow, you're only going to get better if you do that. And if you can grow through an experience of micromanagement, how amazing is that? And to come out the other side and still be friends and still laugh at it, at the silliness of it, because in the end, in the whole scheme of things, it's a very small piece of our day, a small piece of our lives, but we can make it so much better for ourselves by speaking up and using our voice and expressing ourselves, and saying, and making ourselves vulnerable, saying this is not helpful, this isn't allowing me to do my job the way I would like to be able to do my job, this is creating fear, which is not how I want to work. I think it's really important. So, yeah, I think growing and developing is the best way to go through life and to go through a working environment, is to allow everyone to grow, give them the space.
Well, I've relayed my story, my learning with you through this space, Meg. Like, it feels like hundreds of times, because it's been such a big impact and opportunity for growth for me. So I want to, from the depths of my soul, thank you for the role that you played in my growth and development. And as I say, I always have to preface it with the regret that I ever made you feel bad, but think of all the other lives you've saved.
But I mean, you also have to look at it like it actually changed me for the better as well. And then I went on to be a completely different person. Had I not had that experience, I would have stayed possibly where I was. I wouldn't have taken some risks. I wouldn't have learnt to be more creative, to be more innovative. And I learned to be all of that. And I learned to find my voice. And I learned to say no. And that's, the one thing as human beings that we need to learn more than anything is to say no. We don't have to say yes to everything. So, yeah, I think it was a great experience to go through. Not pleasant at the time, but we made it through it and we grew from it, which is important. Yeah.
We certainly did. So if there are people out there that are either the victim or the micromanager themselves, and they're like, I want to tackle this, I really want to do something about this, but I don't know the next step to take, then do reach out to Meg. I'm going to provide all her contact details in the show notes. You'll have mine as well. But if there's enough of a push around that, you and I could even possibly do a little free webinar about creating that path out of it. So please do reach out if you are struggling with the micromanagement impact in your practice. You may not be the micromanager or the victim. You might be another team member that's seeing it go on, or the boss that has allowed it to go on and just says, I want to stop it right now. So please do reach out if you would like some assistance through it. Meg, thank you so much for your contribution to this episode of the podcast. It really feels so wonderful for me to be able to speak about the journey for so many years, but then to meet up with you now, and you and I have maintained our friendship all the way through. We're always on the phone to each other, which is a glorious joy. But it's so wonderful that we've had a chance to publicly put a little bow on our experience together.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate the time to speak, and it's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Meg. See ya. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, you should join the club. The club members receive an online lunch and learn every week where I share insights, systems and strategies to improve the success of your practice. These lunch and learns could not be easier. They are recordings, so you can watch them at a time that suits you. Members also have full access to the library of all of our past topics. The price is just $199 per month, and it is a powerful and effective way to upskill your team. I hope to see you there.